My name is Isa Pace. I'm original from Germany. As a child already, I was very independent. Yes, definitely. I, I had to be. My favorite memories was when I about 3 or 4, I like to undress myself and go to the street. And all the boys, they want to hit me. And then I found a broom and I run around until I catch them all by the feet. It was very stressful. Everything was bombed out and there was not many housing available. And people, they had homes and had extra room. They had to take us in and they was not very happy. I remember we had no toilet in the house. There was an outhouse outside, and every time we want to go down the steps, the woman was very upset and screaming at us. So my mother put a little pot there. So when I had to go small, I rather go in the pot. And then in the evening, my mother carried it out. Oh, it was terrible. No, we was absolutely afraid of this woman. Afraid. She screamed constantly. She was down on the steps and screamed when we just walked up there. They came from big towns. They was bombed out. They had nothing. And we was intruders. She didn't want people like us in the house. Across where we lived then in this house, across was a beautiful park, and all the children they was around, and they was basically in the same shoes like I. Uh, we uh, we had twigs, we make houses from twigs, and I remember these little fuzzy berries, and we put them together, and we catch butterflies and we entertained ourselves every day in the park. I was about 6 years old, and then we got schooled in, whatever. First, only couple hours a day, and and we was all put in one room. And then with the years, it got better. The school was very poor because half of the school was bombed. So it was not the ideal situation. And I remember the teachers was very, very strict. And we always had to put our hands in front of our desk. And boy, when you look around or you want to look out of the window, she came with a little stick and right on your fingers. It hurts. So long I can think, the first years after the war, all the children, they was all friends. We all was hungry. We all looked for food. This was our main occupation, to get food. We went outside the little town and we eat everything we can get and then bring it home. The farmers, and they had dogs and they was looking because everybody was coming, right? And we was pretty much beaten up most of the time, but we got a little bit, potatoes, fruit, and then we got in the woods for himbeeren, and we got them. Nobody ever would accuse their children not to steal. They just said you should be careful. And then the winters was very, very cold. So we went on the train tracks where they fall from the train, the colds, they fall down and we picked them up and we brought them home. It was every day. We had basically no heat in the house because you couldn't get anything. My sister went out, and she was the only one who had from her house in Offenbach linens and silver, and she took it to the farmers and got food for this. This is how we survived. We had not a proper clothing. We didn't had really shoes. There was maybe you had one shoes in black, one in brown, whatever was. It never fit, right? And uh, the woman, mothers, uh, they sewed clothes from and made clothes with needles from the parachutes. They make the needle, and it was, to this day I remember how rough it was on your skin. But this is what we wore. My youngest sister was taken away. Uh, at the time it was called uh, the Dr. Joseph Goebbels Zug. They took all the little children, they were sick with diphthery and Scharlach. They took them out with big buses and transport them to the country. It was very, very bad. So my sister was missing for 2 years. I was 5 or 6, and she was then 2 years old. And then my mom looked for her for about 2 years, went in every orphanage in the countryside. Was very difficult with transport, with the trains. It was filled up, and my father was still away in the war. So I lived with my older sister. My mother found her in an orphanage, quite a way from where we lived. And I don't really recall the paperwork and how my mother recognized her, but I think there was papers there. And when she came home, she was then about 4 years old. And I remember she was always sick as a child. And actually, to this day, she is not in very good health. And I remember she made in the bed, she was undernourished, and of course, everything went to, her name is Rosel. Everything we had went to Rosel for getting her back to health and to a certain weight. But she was a very fussy eater. And I remember I always had to sit later on the table until she finished. I hated her. Needless to say, to this day, I love my sister dearly, and we talk once a week or sometimes 2 times a week. I call Germany because she lives in Germany. She is still not really, really healthy, but okay. And I love her to death. But as children, it was very, very difficult. I remember my mom was always very sad. There was not much laughing because we didn't have anything. We didn't have food. We was always hungry. When the war started with Hitler and the bunkers and the stress and being all the time afraid not to make it to the bunker when the siren came on. I think it took a toll for many years on her. it was so bad with the woman we had to live with. My grandfather, from my mother's side, he had a house, and he had also people, but they moved. And then he asked us to move in with him. My grandfather was a very formal person, and I remember he made tea in the afternoon, and when I asked for a second cup, he said, "This is not ladylike." I never got a second cup of tea. And to this day, when I'm invited, I only drink one cup of tea. Because it was more outside the cities, it was better. Because they didn't get so much bombed, so it was better. I was accepted in, das war Realgymnasium für Mädchen, and you had to have a certain grade to be accepted. And I did make this cut, and this is, I could stay in Dietesheim and finish school, but for the higher school, I had to go to Offenbach. I think I was very excited, you know. I was so proud of me. And my little sister did not do well in school. She was always behind. And so I was very excited. I had friends. They lived in in Mülheim. So I had to walk from Dietesheim to Mülheim, and basically alone. There was, because other children didn't get accepted, so I was. And then we had to take the train from Mülheim nach Offenbach. Now I made quite a bit of friends from Mülheim, so I had to get out from the train with the same children in Mülheim, and they invited me then, except in the summer, because in the summer we could bicycle. My sister, who was at the Air Force at the war in a little town in southern Germany, she met her husband during when he was on leave from the army, and she met him in the family. And they was actually, when the war was over, they're looking for all the soldiers. The family from him hiding her in their house. And when he came back from the war, they got married in 47. And so they moved, they stayed in Osterburgen, and he had a business. He built houses and this type of thing. And my parents, my grandfather passed away, and my parents, they sold the house then, and they moved there and give them some money. I was very close with my mother. We could sit for hours and talk what happened before the war, and how everything worked out, and how my father's sister and brother, they went to America, and my father had the chance to go too, but then just before he had a bad accident in the factory where he worked, and he couldn't go. My father came back about 47. But my father, I never was close because he wouldn't talk much. He didn't want to talk about the war, but my father was, as a young boy, with 16, he was in Russia already, the first war, and he was badly wounded on his head, and the hair never grew over this. and I wasn't close. And to this day, I regret this because I could reach out maybe more afterwards, and I didn't. It was it was tough. What I remember was when you hear the sirens, and there were certain parts in the city and streets where they had bunkers. And I remember we went out of our houses and just hoping to make it to the bunker. And then you sit in the bunker and you had the gas mask on, yeah. And I couldn't breathe. It was the worst thing I remember was to have the gas mask. And then everybody was very quiet, and there was couple little lanterns, but it was so full, and you'll be on the floor and so. And my mother had my my sister in the arm with 2 years, so sick and full with fever. So I had to carry a little suitcase, and my mother said, "You can never ever give this up." And then we, then one day, uh, it was in March, we didn't make it to the bunker, and my parents, they had a big restaurant, and there was five Stockwerke, wie sagt man, 5 stories high. It was a big house. It was on the corner, and it was called das Goethe-Eck, and it was very famous actually. And so we couldn't make it to the bunker, and they bombed the house, and we was in the basement, and then the smell, and then they had to dig us out. And I am with the suitcase, you know, and they carry me, and the streets, there was all this fire. You had to go through, and I screamed and screamed, and I didn't want to run through the fire. And there was a soldier. He lifted me up, and he took me underneath his, in March, it was bitter cold, underneath the coat. In outside was the buses already for the children who were sick. So my mother was on the bus with Rosel. They took her out of her arms, and they took us away with the other bus for safety. And when they wanted to take my suitcase away, they couldn't open my hands. And then they slowly opened my hands and let the suitcase go. It was the worst thing I can remember. And for a long time, I had breathing problems. And the doctor, later on, the doctor say it was just nerves.
When you were holding that suitcase and they were trying to grab it from you, what do you remember feeling or thinking in that moment?
I cannot let the suitcase go. I cannot let it go. This is all we had was the papers. There was papers in. And then later on, we was told we had to clean up Trümmer, yeah. And my mother had nobody, and we lost everything. We never ever got anything. And today, is the police, uh, the big police station there. Now, first of all, you get very independent and not much afraid of things. But you don't forget a bad time. And I have to this day a hard time of putting food in the trash. I just cannot bring myself. I love butter, and I think I was 12 years old, and we had these carton uh, for each family, and we got each week we got this little bit of butter, right? And my mother asked me, "What would you like for your birthday?" And I remember I say, "I like to bite in a piece of butter." So, so my mother saved it only for me, and on my birthday I eat the butter. And to this day I always have butter.
Mm.
Little things, you know.
Mm.
He was my next door neighbor. His name was James J. Pace. Madly in love. When I met him the first time, his landlord uh, called me, and he was the police chief in Hartheim. I moved to Hartheim, and he told me he only rented to grandpa for the money because he needed money. But this young fellow take 2 baths, 2 showers a day. When he goes in the shower, he doesn't shut off the light. And water money is very expensive. Either he pays more water money or he have to get out. And or I can please tell this fellow. So I came over one evening when he was home, and I knocked on his door, and I was not very polite because I really didn't want to do this. And I said, Mr. Klein told me when you don't pay water money or more rent, you have to be out because you're taking 2 showers a day and don't shut off the light when you be in the shower. And the first thing he say, "Who in the hell are you?" And this is how it started. At the time, I drove a sports car, uh, and and I was very interested in fast cars. So he saw this what I'm driving, and a couple weeks later he come over and he had 2 tickets for the Rehburg Ring, what is very famous in Germany, and or I would go with him. I really wasn't interested in him either, but going to this race, you know. So I did go, and this is when it started. They were stationed in Hartheim. It was a big military base, and it was a very nice uh, part of town with expensive houses. Obviously, a policeman doesn't make this much money to support this. So he was up in the rank, and he could not, and they had not enough um, beds in the barracks for the higher up, so he had to move out in town and get something. Came from the military earlier than I because Heike still had school, and we wanted to finish her school in Germany. After the school, Heike and I were moved. Heike had to change so many schools. And I think one time she counted them, She changed 15 times. And this is hard on a kid. She adjusted very well because of all the moving, you know. Uh, she was always a smart student. And I don't think it was so bad for her. She fits in everywhere. She had to. We moved to a small town in Connecticut. It calls Bristol. Big adjustment. I lived a very comfortable life in Germany. And then I came to the States, and it was very difficult. Um, no car, no really nice apartment. I have to say, the family unity is so much stronger than sometimes in the Americans. They come together. They're using every excuse to get together, the whole family, and you don't have this much here. But the families are smaller too here, in most cases, right? So, but there you have the uncle and the grandfather and the cousins and more children, you know. The first time I came to America, I loved it. I just loved it. To this day, I love America.
What did you love so much about it?
The freedom. And you always have food to eat. Now we had food in Germany too later on, but it's freedom. When you want to do any business, you can do it, right? You cannot do this in Germany. Everything is. He always said 1, 2, 3, very regimented, and here everything is so free. We didn't stay long in Bristol, maybe a month or so. And then we moved to West Hartford. West Hartford is really a beautiful little town. You know it. It's not little, it's a good sized town. Uh, Eventually, we bought a house there. I opened a store in West Hartford Center, and I worked there. Then I sold the store, and I was very happy because at the time the store worked very well. Mhm. And then the mall opened up, and all the business they died in West Hartford Center, you know. So I just sold it in the nick of time. We both wanted a child, and so Heike was then about 12. Then little Tanya came. I love this girl. I was born in Hartford, Connecticut, in St. Francis Hospital. I had the worst pregnancy you can imagine. Kidney. For 9 months, I was 3 months in the hospital, on and off, you know. So it was tough, you know. We didn't have much money. Part-time job. He worked in a swimming pool company. He worked a full-time job and then a part-time job on the weekend. But the part-time job, I remember it was Rizzo Pool. They're still in existence. And because of the health insurance, and I got pregnant, they paid everything. You cannot imagine what is meant for us. We couldn't pay for the pregnancy and the births. and all these doctor bills, we could never afford it. We would be on welfare or something. Heike took quite a bit care of the little one. She took her out and with her friends, and Heike was a little wild child. And we really didn't have a lot of money when Tanya was born. And so we bought this stroller, and couple days later or a week later, the stroller was broken. And we said, oh, so we bring it back to the store and complain. And they give us a new stroller, and this went on and on. They took her in the stroller down the hill in the grass. Just wild. Was like a doll. People stopped us sometimes on the street to look at her. She was absolutely gorgeous. And I think Heike was in love with this doll, and always so perfectly dressed. And I think that the other thing is, klingt an Heike. Heike was fun with all the kids, the bigger kids, and there she was. Heike was fun. We rented in Bloomfield, Connecticut, and then I got my real estate license, and I listed and sold houses. And at the time, it started actually with the store. I had good customer, and I had high priced items and very fine antiques. And I went once a week to New York and buy new things. And then customer, they asked me to come to their houses and how we could arrange something, what they bought and so. And I got in this. And then after I sold the store, I had quite a clientele. And then, of course, with this connection, when they want to sell their houses, the first thing is, oh, can you help us? How to decorate and sell the house and so. And then I give it to a friend of mine, always, because I didn't have a license. So I did my license. I went to school. I did my license. And then I was full-time real estate. And when I had a listing, I come in and I told them what to do. And it was a very successful business. Then I gave up the real estate and got full-time in decorating. And I had a couple very good clients. So I was busy. He was in the car business, and I worked in the office. So I worked for him for 12 years. Things got better with us, financial, because your grandfather was a work alcoholic and always makes things so it worked out. And we was then financial better off. And there was a department store. We didn't have much credit, but there was a department store, and they had a travel agency, and they give us credit to buy the tickets from them. And so my mother came 2 times a year and visit us. Now my father was still living. He refused. And I think it came from the war, and all this, right? He could never see why I would marry him. He did not like Americans in general. He was a prisoner of war. So, we were so busy with our own and the family and the schooling. And when you're young, you don't think so much on your parents, how they feel. You get selfish because you're so involved in your own little world and making ends meet, responsibility. And here was my mother, she came, and so I had my mother, right? But my mother always came alone for about 6 weeks. She stayed with us. James did everything in his power when she was there. Always get her clothes. She always come with not so much clothes. She goes back with a big suitcase. We buy things for her. She loved to go shopping. There was in Bloomfield a Christmas store, and there was all these Christmases decorated. I never forget this. My mother almost passed out. So beautiful. All the lights. We didn't have this in Germany. All the lights and things. So we showed her things, in America when she was here. I think my childhood had a lot to do who I am today because I had to be independent. I had to be strong. I couldn't be afraid. And then when I came to America and it was quite tough, financial and all this, I could cope with it. And I think I always had a very pessimistic attitude, and it brought me through it. And I'm basically a happy person. And last week it was my 82nd birthday, and I had my family. I'm very happy today how my life went in all the different stages, and they make me who I am.